Hey, Earthlings, how's you doing? I hope you're doing well. Now, this episode on my channel is dedicated to this guy.
Clark is off. Got three West Ham defenders surging around him, but he finds now Peter Lorimer inside for Johnny Giles. And Hunter coming up fast to drive it. Oh, and what a goal!
Okay, so that's Norman Hunter, the footballer who played for Leeds and England. And I used to be a Leeds fan, or I'm a Leeds fan, I suppose, but used to be a Leeds fan. I used to go to Ellen Road very regularly in the early 70s and saw Leeds, and Norman Hunter was part of that kind of famous team. One abiding memory I have of Hunter actually is he led or helped Mick Jones up the stairs to get his kind of FA Cup winners medal in 1972. Jones had been injured really badly just at the end of the game, and Hunter was a kind of very caring guy. There was a black footballer called Albert Johansson, and he actually gave me a medal in 1970 when I was playing in a kind of kids team, and he was I think the first black footballer in the English First Division, and and so I think he got into difficulties, financial and maybe alcohol related, in later life, and I think Hunter used to bail him out a lot. So he was a kind of caring guy, even though he had a kind of reputation of being a bit of a kind of tough guy. There's quite a few in those times, really. Anyway, so it's to Norman Hunter that this is dedicated. I did shed a tear when I heard about his death a couple of days ago. So, what I want to talk about is something that comes up in this book, which is Empty Cages by Tom Regan. He introduces us to three types of animal advocates. He talks about Davincians and Damascens and to muddlers. Kind of suggests that most people in the movement are muddlers. I suppose I'm a muddler. I would identify as a muddler. He said that he himself was a muddler. I mean, famously he was a butcher and then became, the kind of leading voice in rights-based animal rights. And so, he muddled through. In other words, what you get really with the kind of Davincians, you get this idea of kind of like an empathetic kind of genius, even as children, and they kind of like they get it. They've got animal consciousness. It's kind of there even as a child, and they kind of don't need any information. They've just got it. With the Damascus, it's obviously the road to Damascus kind of experience that there they are, and suddenly whack, something happens, and then their life is transformed. And then you got the muddlers, the kind of the group that most people seem to kind of fit into, which the people who kind of like muddle along, kind of they've had a few seeds planted, they've grown, they've kind of connected the dots. And Reagan always had this great idea that he said that you eventually kind of muddle along until eventually one day you look in the mirror and there's an animal advocate looking back at you, which I think is a great kind of image. Now, there are some people in the movement, this is what intrigues me as a sociologist now, who claim to be the Damascens here. They're kind of suggesting that one thing created them as a vegan animal rights advocate. And it could be a speech. There are some famous speeches, modern day ones, Philip Woolen, for example, and obviously going back to Reagan, 1989, absolutely fantastic speech that he did at an anti-vivisection rally, still regarded by many people as the greatest animal rights speech that was ever made. So there's great speeches, there's great kind of movies or films. In my day, the Animals film, 1982, was very, very important in the movement. It was kind of my generation's Earthlings, and Earthlings itself has got a kind of place in the history of animal advocacy, the so-called vegan maker. So there is that kind of issue. Now, what I'm trying to get at is when these people kind of say, well, it was X film or X talk or X speech that I saw that created me as a vegan, that's the bit that I want to kind of ask them, is that really true? In other words, was there nothing at all going on in terms of animal consciousness, as Reagan talks about it, or kind of, you've never heard of animal ethics, you've never kind of heard of veganism, and then suddenly, boom, this one event comes, and then, bang, you're transformed into a vegan animal rights kind of advocate. That's the implication of these claims that, oh, that person or that film made me vegan, that kind of claim. And you see it quite often in social media. So I just want to kind of see whether that's feasible. I would suggest it's very rare myself. The model I use is like a jigsaw. I tend to think that what tends to happen in terms of your kind of knowledge and consciousness is that you kind of get these little bits, and eventually, they all go into place, and then eventually you've got the full picture. And but that jigsaw can take a long time maybe to put together. And then there's the other issue about this jigsaw is that not all the pieces are the same size. So what I tend to think is looking back, when you ask the question or when you think about kind of, when you start to live vegan, when you look back at that, you kind of maybe think of the big pieces of the jigsaw, and maybe forget about the smaller ones, and or maybe one of the big pieces would have one of the latest ones to go down, this kind of stuff. But I still kind of think that's a kind of in the muddle, the muddler kind of era, the kind of the kind of Reagan type thing, that you're muddling along and eventually you've got it. It's not this kind of one single event. I think it's almost like people remember that one event, and that's the kind of question that I'm posing in this. The people who say on social media or anywhere else, kind of, well, it was X that created me, as it were, as a vegan. Is that really true? Are you saying that there's nothing at all going on at all? You were kind of merrily going along your life as as a speciesist animal user, and then suddenly whack, this one event happened out of the blue, as it were, and then suddenly you had this transformative kind of event in your life, and that's changed it forever. Or is it more likely that looking back, it was a whole series of kind of things? It's for me as a sociologist, it's a really kind of interesting, almost like research question. So this is what I wanted to put out there. Like maybe give me some data. Maybe in the comments, are you claiming to be this kind of Damascus, this kind of issue of well, yeah, suddenly this one event happened and that changed me forever, or are you saying, along with Reagan, that actually you were kind of muddler, there's lots of different kind of things, but maybe looking back, there's maybe one or two that really stand out in your mind, and that's what you're really saying. When you're saying, X made me vegan, you're actually saying, well, that's the big part that I remember, but maybe you're acknowledging that there's lots of other things as well. It's an interesting issue, because I do see these claims really regularly in the movement, that was almost like, out of the blue, there was this one thing that somebody saw on YouTube or whatever, and suddenly whack, that was the thing that did it. I'm very skeptical about that, but I'm interested, if is that your story? Is that what happened to you? If it is, tell me in the comments. Or is it more likely that that's the one big thing that you remember, or something like that? I'm interested in the kind of details. What's the process that you went through? Was it this sudden event, or was it a longer type series of things? So that's what it is. Anyway, so I want to say, look after yourself in this troubling times of ours, and I hope everybody's looking after themselves and everything's groovy and all that jazz. So take care, Earthlings, and I'll see you again.